Have you ever wondered what life was like for the average person in ancient Egypt? We often hear about the magnificent pharaohs, the golden treasures, and the colossal pyramids. But what about the millions of people who actually built and sustained that incredible civilization? Forget the kings and queens for a moment. Let's journey back in time to discover the real story of ancient Egypt. The story of the farmers, the artisans, and the families who lived, worked, and dreamed along the banks of the Nile River. This is the Egypt you've never seen before, and trust me, it's just as fascinating. The lifeblood of ancient Egypt wasn't gold or power, it was water. The Nile River was everything. It was a superhighway for trade, a source of food, and most importantly, the reason the desert bloomed. Each year, without fail, the Nile would flood its banks, leaving behind a thick layer of rich, black silt. This was a gift from the gods, the perfect fertilizer for their crops. The entire rhythm of Egyptian life was dictated by this cycle: the flooding, the planting, and the harvest. For the vast majority of the population, the farmers, this cycle was their calendar, their clock, and their key to survival. So, what was a typical day like for an Egyptian farmer? It started early, at the crack of dawn. Men, women, and even children headed out to the fields. Their tools were simple, often made of wood and stone. They used wooden plows, sometimes pulled by oxen, to turn the soil. Then came the sowing of seeds, primarily wheat and barley, which were the main ingredients for their two dietary staples: bread and beer. Yes, you heard that right. Beer wasn't just a drink, it was considered a food, a form of payment, and a daily necessity for everyone, from the laborers building pyramids to the priests in the temples. It was nutritious and safer to drink than potentially contaminated water. The work was grueling. Under the scorching Egyptian sun, farmers irrigated their fields using a device called a shaduf, a long pole with a bucket on one end and a weight on the other. It was a simple but ingenious piece of technology that allowed them to lift water from the Nile into their irrigation canals. Harvest time was a period of intense activity for the entire community. They used wooden sickles with flint blades to cut the grain, which was then threshed by having animals trample over it to separate the grain from the stalk. The grain was then stored in granaries, a portion of which was paid as taxes to the pharaoh. This tax system is what fed the army, the priests, and the thousands of workers on state projects like temples and tombs. After a long day in the fields, where did they go home to? It certainly wasn't a palace. Most Egyptians lived in simple houses, made from a readily available material: mud bricks. They would mix mud from the Nile with straw, press it into wooden molds, and let it dry in the sun. These bricks were surprisingly durable in the dry climate. The homes were designed to stay cool, with small windows high up on the walls and flat roofs. This flat roof was a crucial part of the house. It was like an extra room. Inside, the homes were modest. A typical house might have 2 or 3 rooms with floors made of packed earth, sometimes covered with red mats. Furniture was minimula, few wooden stools, maybe a small table, and some chests to store clothing and personal items. People slept on red mats, or simple wooden beds with a special kind of pillow, a wooden or stone headrest. It might not look comfortable to us, but it kept their heads elevated off the floor, away from any creepy. The household was a busy place. Women were responsible for managing the home, which was a huge job. They ground the grain into flour every single day, baked bread in clay ovens, brewed beer, and spun flax into linen to make clothing for the family. While men dominated the public sphere, women had significant rights in ancient Egypt. They could own property, run businesses, and even initiate a divorce. Now, not everyone was a farmer. Ancient Egypt had a thriving class of skilled artisans and craftsmen who were highly respected for their talents. Think of all the beautiful artifacts we see in museums today: the intricate jewelry, the painted pottery, the majestic statues, the detailed tomb paintings. All of these were created by the hands of anonymous craftsmen. These artisans often worked in large state-run workshops, organized by their specialty. There were stonemasons, carpenters, jewelers, painters, and sculptors. Their skills were passed down from father to son, generation after generation. Imagine a bustling workshop near a temple complex. You would hear the constant chip 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 of sculptors carving stone, the whir of a potter's wheel, and the tap of a goldsmith's hammer. These craftsmen weren't just making pretty objects, they were creating items with deep religious and cultural meaning. The statues housed the spirits of gods and pharaohs. The amulets offered protection. The tomb paintings ensured the deceased would have a prosperous afterlife. Their work was essential to the Egyptian worldview. For their labor, they were paid not in money. Coinage was unad used for most of Egypt's history, but in rations of grain, beer, oil, and cloth. It was a barter economy, and your skill determined your quality of life. So we have the farmers who grew the food and the artisans who created the goods. How did everything move around? Through a network of merchants and traders. The Nile River was the ancient world's equivalent of a super. Boats of all sizes sailed up and down the river, their sails billowing in the wind. They carried grain from the farming villages to the cities, stone from the quarries to the construction sites, and pottery from the workshops to the markets. Local markets were vibrant, noisy places. People would gather to trade their surplus goods. A farmer might trade a sack of barley for a piece of pottery, or a fisherman might exchange his catch for a pair of new sandals. It was a social hub where you could catch up on news and gossip while doing your shopping. For more exotic goods, like cedar wood from Lebanon or lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, Egypt relied on long-distance trade expeditions, commissioned by the pharaoh. These journeys were dangerous but brought incredible wealth and luxury into the kingdom. What bound all these different people together? More than anything, it was their shared religion. Religion wasn't just something you did on a holiday. It permeated every aspect of daily life. The Egyptians worshipped a huge pantheon of gods and goddesses, each with their own responsibilities. Ra, the sun god, sailed across the sky each day. Osiris was the god of the afterlife. Isis was the mother goddess who protected families. Ordinary people didn't typically worship inside the grand temples that was reserved for priests and the pharaoh. Instead, they had small shrines in their homes where they would leave offerings of food, drink, and flowers for household gods like Base, the protector of children and pregnant women, or Tuaret, the hippo goddess of childbirth. They wore amulets for protection, like the Ankh for life or the Eye of Horus for healing. Life was hard, but it wasn't all work. The Egyptians knew how to have a good time. Religious festivals were a major source of entertainment. These were huge public celebrations with processions, music, dancing, and feasting. It was a chance for the community to come together, honor their gods, and take a break from their daily labor. Music was a big part of life, with instruments like harps, lutes, and flutes. They also loved games. We've found ancient board games like Senet, a game of passing your pieces across a board, which was not just for fun, but was also thought to represent the journey to the afterlife. Children played with wooden toys, dolls, and balls made of reeds or leather. They learned the skills they would need as adults by watching and helping their parents. So, when we look at the pyramids, let's not just see a tomb for a king. Let's see the thousands of farmers whose surplus grain fed the workers. Let us see the stonemasons who cut the blocks with incredible precision and the laborers who moved them into place. Let us see the artisans who decorated the inner chambers and the scribes who kept track of it all. The real story of ancient Egypt is the collective effort of millions of ordinary people. Their daily struggles, their simple joys, their deep faith, and their incredible hard work are the true foundation upon which one of history's greatest civilizations was built. Their lives may seem distant, but their legacy is all around us, written in stone and preserved in the sands of time. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the daily life of ancient Egypt. If you found this as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history. Let me know in the comments what other aspects of ancient life you'd like to explore next. See you in the next video.